Good morning, it's Feedback Friday, and today we're talking about how to change criticism into feedback. So welcome. So I'm very excited. You may or not heard on Facebook or LinkedIn that I am about to go on holiday for 3 whole weeks. So I will be offline for 2 weeks. And then I'll be back home for a week, and I will be back on social media, but I'll be decluttering my home and my mind, ready to actually decide what's the next 18 months is going to look like for me, both at home and in the business. So that's what I'll be doing, and that's what I practice with my clients. Good morning, whoever's just joined me, please say hello, pop a comment below. It's always lovely to have that feedback, to know that I'm not here on my own. It's amazing. So today I want to talk about changing criticism into feedback, and I've just realized that something's pinging in the background, so let me just get rid of that. She says, trying to ping back to the right page. So let's first of all define what is criticism. So criticism is when someone tells you that what you're doing is not okay, it's wrong. Okay, that would be a very simple thing, is that you're being criticized, as in you're being told that what you're doing or what you're not doing, or what you are saying or you're not saying, something about how you are being is not okay for that person. And so criticism can come from somebody else, but it could also come from yourself. You might compare yourself to somebody else and think, well, they're doing it different, and therefore you may criticize yourself. And those that know, if you haven't already read it, I've written my first book was Manage Your Critic: From Overwhelm to Clarity in 7 Steps. And so we can do it by comparing and contrasting ourselves with other people, and then being critical of ourselves because we're different to other people, or we're not as good, or we're not as fast, or we're too slow, or whatever it might talk too much, talk too little, whatever. You might be critical and criticizing yourself. When it changes to feedback, on the other hand, feedback is evidence-based. And it's collected over time, and it gives you data, it gives you information. So the truth is, if 3 people said you talk too much, that becomes feedback if you take it as evidence. As you say, okay, so I've got 3 people that say I talk too much. But the real transformation comes from when it goes from criticism to feedback, is when you can ask the person for their evidence. Because often what happens is somebody says to you, you talk too much. That's their inference, because it's too much for them in that moment, but based on their map of the world and how much talking is enough for that person. And for that information to be useful to you, for it to be feedback opposed to just criticism, then you need to know, what did they hear and see? Was it the number of words? Was it how long you spoke for? What was it they heard and saw that told them that you were talking too much? Maybe they heard and saw somebody go like that 3 times to try and talk, and so what they're witnessing and what they're observing is somebody else is trying to say something and you are talking too much. That is now information that you can use, because if actually what you want is to be able to hear other people and to be heard, then you may not be consciously aware that somebody else had opened their mouth 3 times trying to get a word in edgeways. And certainly for me, I know I have a bit of a blind spot on my right, so whenever I co-facilitate, my facilitators know that if anyone's sat in a circle that's on this side, that they will go, Cheryl, I think so-and-so's got something to say, because often I have to sort of train myself to look a little bit further around this way. It's one of my blind spots. I just peripherally don't see the movement on that side. And so my co-facilitators know that about me, and then I can get them to keep a track on it in case I miss those kinds of cues. So if you can ask somebody for their evidence, then you can start to go, oh, it's because of X, Y, and Z. Now, if it is a group experience, you could check with the other person if that was true, because again, this person's now inferring, because they've gone like, they're trying to speak and that you're talking too much. And then that is information that you can then make an informed decision. Another thing that people might do is they might tell you, the criticism might come based on impact. So they might go, you make me feel useless. Okay, so that's the impact it's having. You go, okay, so I'm making you feel useless. So you might then feel horrible because you've made someone else feel useless. And so that's criticism. That's a fact that, you know, what you're doing is not okay for this person. But you can't use that information unless you understand, one, what did they actually hear and see? What was the evidence? And what are they making up about that? So if someone says to you, you've made me feel useless, you go, okay, so what did I do or say? What is it that you heard or saw? And what is it you make up? So it might be that when they talked about something they were really proud of, you didn't respond. And so they made up that you weren't pleased with it. When you can separate out what is the evidence and what's the inference, then you've got information, you've got actual behavioural things that you can see, and then you can make an informed decision about whether or not that's a personal development task for yourself. Is that something about your behaviour you want to change? And you may not want to. It might be a case of going, do you know what, that is who I am. And the lovely thing about changing criticism to feedback is if you go step back a couple of steps in the process, we talk about whether you're going to change your behaviour. The first thing is, what do you want to have happen? If this is somebody who really matters to you and you want them to feel like you've got time to listen and you're not talking too much, or you want them to feel that they're a valued contributor to your life, then if what you want to have happen is those things, then this information is relevant. But if someone says to you, you need to run, you're not running enough every week, they think you're wrong for not doing any running, but you don't want to do running, then that information is simply information from their map of the world. It's their perspective, their perception. And you don't actually have to act on it at all. You can simply listen into it. You might want to say, well, how do you know that? You know, what do you hear and see that tells you I'm not running enough? And even ask them, what's the impact of you not running? Because the likelihood is they're comparing and contrasting. This is what they've decided is right, and they're seeing you not doing it. And sometimes people start to question that them being them is okay if other people aren't doing the same. And so they can often give you feedback because they want you to change in order to make them okay being them. Whereas actually, if it's okay for them to be different, and you are really confident and you have clarity of what you want and you're confident in who you are, then we can listen to each other's differences without feeling like that our own foundations of us being good enough, that we're valued, that we're important is okay. So the first thing is get clarity of what you want, because some people will tell me, give me advice about business, or you need to be online on every platform, you have to do that. And I'm like, actually, what I want to achieve with my business and the plan that my husband and I have for our retirement over the next 6 or 7 years, I don't have to do that. I get what I need from what I'm doing. But I do want to find my level of consistency. So taking time off, by some people's standards, they say, you know, I could schedule posts, I could be putting things out there. But my consistency, my model for consistency is that I take off 3-4 weeks in August, and I have done for the last 21 years that I've been self-employed. I take 2 to 3 weeks off in April, and I take 3 to 4 weeks off in December. I always plan my business around it. I have clients who are on retainers. I get paid even when I'm not working, because I deliver a service that has 12 months of value, and they've got tasks to do when I'm not around. My business is set up so that I can take those times off. Whereas if I was to compare and contrast myself with other people who are on there every single week for 365 days of the year, it would be easy for me to think that I'm doing it wrong. And if someone else told me I was doing it wrong, then I might question myself. And I've been questioning that actually over the last couple of months. It's something I've been sort of paying attention to. So I want you to think about, please share if you've had some criticism. If you don't really feel that confident popping it in on the comments, feel free to DM me. I am about to go on holiday at 9 o'clock this evening for 3 weeks, so you may not get a response straight back if it comes in late today, but I have got some time this afternoon. And I'd be happy to help you unpack it so that you can break down, you know, if it's criticism, first of all, what's the evidence? What did they hear and see? And if you are criticising yourself, what do you hear and see that tells you that? What are you making up? What's your inference? I call it your story, your narrative, because for every behavior that's out there, we can all have our individual perception, our own individual interpretation. And one of the reasons people love working with me is because I do tend to have quite rose-tinted glasses. So if you're being critical of somebody else, can give you another reason for that behavior, something else, another perception. Now, my friends don't like to always hear, they tell me that they just want to be angry with their ex-husband, and they want to moan about them, and I'm not to give any positive slides on why they might be behaving like that, but there's always a different perception, a different way of interpreting it, and that's where, you know, it comes down to your own life story, your own life experiences, your values, what's important to you. So a good example I use when I work with mums and parents with teenagers, you know, got a child laying on the sofa. One parent could interpret laying on the sofa as someone who's lolloping around and they're lazy and they don't contribute, and could be criticizing them for never doing anything to help around the house. And another parent might see a child who is resting, restoring, recharging, having really worked their socks off through their exams, or really been struggling with finding out who they are as they work out who they are separate from their parents, as they start to work out how they're going to be this responsible adult and going to pull away and peel away from that safety net that their parents have provided for them. So while they're in that tangle and that rustle between, I want you to be there to keep me safe and I want to be able to do it on my own, you know, it can be a bit of an emotional tussle, and they can be pulling backwards and forwards, and when they see someone laying around, they might be thinking actually they're just resting and restoring. Equally, as the parents often is the case, when I ask the parents what they'd like to have happen, quite often what is happening is the parent would like to be able to lollop and laze around a bit more, but feels that they can't stop and they can't rest. And so that's when this information becomes feedback. You go, okay, well, you've got a choice. You can see them as lolloping and lazy, or you could see them as resting and restoring. And if what you'd like to have happen is rest and restore, then you could work on actually what do you need in order to rest and restore, and that might involve asking them to help you with a few tasks in order that you could take some time off and rest. Or it simply could be that you just don't do a few of those tasks and you take some time off to rest. I hope today's video has been useful to you. So please think about you know, your definition of criticism, and how you change it into feedback is by asking questions to find out, what did the person hear and see? What was their evidence? What do you infer? What did they infer? What did they make up? What's their narrative? What's their story that they make up to make sense of that behavior? And then what is the impact? Because ultimately, when this is people that you care about, if I talk, okay, for some people it's too much, for some people it's too little, and on the same people on a different day it could be too much or too little. That is a constant changing cycle, and I don't know without feedback whether it's okay for that person or not. And so for me personally, I will make a conscious effort that when I know I'm in sort of word torrid, vomit, verbal diarrhea, whatever you want to call it, when I know I've got a lot of words coming out, I know that what works for me is I want the other person to feel heard. I want to hear them. And so I check in and just say to them, you know, do this. My friends and my family have permission to go like that to me, like to stop me, because then I realize they do want to talk. Sometimes they don't. They're quite happy. They're in that space where they don't want to have to think. They don't want to have to say anything. And they're very happy to sit there and go like that while I get all of my words out. And so in my case, I've learned to just check in and get feedback in the moment. And if I get criticized, I am absolutely own the fact that I have a lot of words, and that when I talk fast and a lot of information comes out, and quite often I start talking without letting the listener even know what my purpose for speaking is. So they don't know what they're supposed to be paying attention to, whether I need them to solve a problem, whether I need them to do a task for me, or whether I'm just venting and they just need to listen. And I know that's what happens, and so I don't see it as criticism. I just see it as a bit of feedback that says, oh, wait there, I've done my pattern of chatting without telling you why I'm talking, and now I've left you a bit confused. And so that can work for me. So I hope that's been useful to you. I am now going to be on holiday for 3 weeks, but I will be back on social media on Monday the 16th, and I'll do some videos again then, but I'm not actually back coaching until Monday the 23rd. Have a fantastic summer, and please make sure that you work out how to change criticism into feedback.